Very quickly before I start this episode, I want to say just a few things. One, if you are listening and you have not yet subscribed, liked, or left a review for the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to, please go and do that now. It is very, very helpful in getting the word out for this show. Also, just tell someone about it. If you know someone that may benefit from the knowledge that my guests are bringing, just give them a call, shoot them a text, and let them know this podcast is out there. If you want to reach out to me, I really like hearing from people. I'm enjoying all the feedback I'm getting. You can find me on Instagram. It's Working Class Hollywood, or shoot me an email. It's show, SHOW, at workingclasshollywood.com. Secondly, it is the holidays, and I'm going to take 1 week off from publishing, so I will not be releasing a new podcast episode the week of New Year's. I will be back in the second week of January with more great interviews. I've got some good ones lined up already. So happy holidays, everybody. Stay safe and enjoy this week's podcast. Welcome to Working Class Hollywood, conversations with people that make the movies, TV shows, and entertainment you love. If you're looking to break into or move up in the entertainment industry, or you're just a fan of content and want to hear about how it's made, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Jeremiah Smith.
Go out there. You don't need a business card that says Vice President of Creative. Do the job, figure out how to make extraordinary contributions to the department. That's how you will get recognized.
My guest today is Zack Olin. Zack is the Vice President of Creative Development for ABC Studios, and ABC Studios is the television production arm of Disney. They make shows such as Grey's Anatomy, Criminal Minds, Blackish, and a newer show called The Kids Are All Right, which Zack actually developed for the studio. He goes into great detail about how that show came to be from beginning to end. He talks a lot about what a development executive does, as well as a current executive at a studio or network, and the differences between those two really interesting positions. If you're at all interested in television, writing, development, Zack gives some really good behind-the-scenes information from all the different networks and studios that he's worked at through the years. Zack is a really smart guy. He's got a lot of knowledge to share, so I hope you enjoy my chat with Zack Olin. Hi, Zack.
Good morning.
How's it going, man?
It's doing fantastic. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for coming over.
It's very early.
It is. We decided to do this very early because Zack has some plans, and he was nice enough to come over and do this bright and early in the morning.
Heading to the mountains with my family.
Fun. So Zack, where are you from, man? Zack and I, we know each other because we have our kids have been in school together, preschool and stuff. So we've mostly seen each other at either at drop off where we're both like wearing sweatpants and our hairs we still have bed head, or at like kids' birthday parties.
We're the dads.
We are the dads. So. Yeah, I'm excited to get to know you a little better.
Yeah, you be careful what you wish for. It's a very, very long, crazy story. I'm from a small town, originally Bradford in northwestern Pennsylvania, right on the New York state line, a population of about 9,000 people. That's where I was born and lived for quite a while, and then I moved to Warren, Pennsylvania, which is about 40 minutes west of that.
Were you like playing in the forest and like riding your bikes around everywhere, like no electronics, no TV kind of thing?
Exactly. It is that thing that I think we all talk about craving and hearkening back to now with our children so plugged in and we as adults plugged in, that there was a lot of downtime. And back then you could actually be bored, where now it feels like you don't have the luxury of being bored because there's always something that you can be engaged with. And and my dad's house in particular was right in the middle of the national forest, and for fun we would chop firewood, and in the wintertime we would spend hours walking up and down frozen creeks seeing who would fall in, and then walking very cold with frozen boots back to the house, and riding three-wheelers and mini bikes and building forts in the woods and all the things that you probably wouldn't let your children do today. And it was, again, pre-internet, so it was a less scary place.
Yeah, it sounds very idyllic. And then, so how did you end up coming out to Los Angeles? I'm assuming you went to college.
I did. I went to Ohio University. I studied civil engineering.
Right, makes total sense. Why
Absolute
you're in Hollywood
sense.
now.
Where I grew up, these jobs there were no reality to these jobs. I might as well told them that I wanted to be an astronaut if I said I wanted to go be a filmmaker or work in the record industry or any of those things that people just do out here. So I pursued something that was stable. I was always grew up sort of with an artistic bend, so I probably was leaning towards architecture, but engineering allowed me to apply some of those things. But, again, how I was raised, it was sort of be practical, make sure you can pay off your student loans. And then if you need that to be your fallback plan, then pursue the things that you're interested in. So got my degree, moved out here 2 weeks after I graduated college. I had a little sense of Los Angeles because 6 months before, during our winter break, my close friend and I drove cross country and visited his sister, who was working in the legal department at DreamWorks at the time. And so that was my first taste of Los Angeles, which I fell in love with because, again, growing up in such a small town with a lot of snow and not a lot of different types of things to do, Los Angeles was kind of the dream place that was the opposite of those things, with beach and every type of food that you could eat, any type of person that you wanted to meet, any type of career that you're interested in. And we spent about a week out here, and I got to sort of get a sense of what was going on and seeing his sister working in the environment. And I remember she gave me a DreamWorks shirt, and I just felt like the coolest person when I went back to Ohio to have that. And it was a place I was interested in coming. And fortunately, I had a friend when I did graduate who had already was set up with a job out here who wanted to move out here. So I caught a ride with her. And
but you didn't have a job lined up.
I did not. I moved out here with no leads, and I think a lot of ambition. And I initially thought that I might go into the music industry because I had a friend from college who left college early to come work at a indie label out here, and I'm into music, and that felt like the right fit for me. And as I got out here, for many reasons, it just wasn't right for me. Music for me is a very sort of personal thing that I just didn't want to complicate by having it be my career as well. So I was out here. I was figuring things out. I had never sort of known anybody who came out here, so I didn't have any sort of trajectory in mind. So way back when, again, date myself, I moved out here, there was this thing called the Creative Directory, which I picked that up and I made cold calls.
It's just like a book that had all the companies and all the executives that worked there and their contact information and stuff.
Yes.
I had that too, so I'm dating myself with you.
And again, it would have credits, so I would just call it like, oh, Gracie Films. What is that? Simpsons? Sure, I will call them.
Yeah.
I remember they were actually very nice to me. They're like, we don't have anything for you, but I'm like, oh, very kind. So I did sort of odd jobs. I worked at a record store. Back then, temping was much more of a thing. So there was these companies that would do, temporary work assignments, and anything from, light industry to entertainment. So I did a myriad of those things, whatever I could get, partially to pay the bills, then also in hopes of getting some sort of foot in the door at a company. But again, I'd done everything from going into a legal office and they would say, we have 10,000 files that need to be reorganized. Mind numbing and definitely not the thing that I wanted to do. Another thing I would do, mass mailings. That was fun. And then eventually through a friend of a friend, I had gotten an interview to be a production assistant on this HBO film called Weapons of Mass Destruction, which was written by Larry Gelbart. They responded to me, gave me a shot. It was one of those things that was the most exciting thing that ever happened to me, really. They're like, you're a PA, you need a car. At that point, I had just bought a used Volkswagen Rabbit that would strand me probably 2 or 3 times a month with various issues. And I remember my first day on the job, my car died. I got a rental car just to get me through that week. Of course, that car died the first day on the job, and I was so convinced I was going to be fired that day. I was doing a run from Culver City, where our production office was, to HBO, and I was just mortified, and I thought for sure that it was just they were like, okay, pack your bags, you're done. I eventually bet on myself the next week and bought a better car and just hoped that I could continue paying that off and work from there. So I worked on that film for a while, which was just my first entrance. And just,
and were you in the office or were you on set, or were you?
I was in the office. So I was primarily doing runs between sets. But it was great because it gave me exposure to what was going on inside the office, what a UPM did, what a production coordinator did. I saw, some of my peers there, what was working for them, what wasn't working for them. And they really, that sort of position, like it's silly to have to say this, like showing up on time,
Right.
having a good work ethic on top, not making excuses. And then,
I mean, that sounds very basic, but there are a lot of people that don't know how to do those things. I've heard people talk about how, like, just like showing up on time and having a good attitude is like 80% of like the job. You know what I mean? Because there's so many people that just can't even get themselves to do that.
It's true. And I mean, that's the start. And then from there, that people will hopefully recognize you're smart, you can learn, you have input, there's something unique about you as far as what you're able to contribute to the job. So I did that, and that, like I said, I was exposed to a lot of things, everything from, I remember having to go down to Watts to a certain locksmith that would duplicate keys that were not supposed to be duplicated. And I was new I was new to Los Angeles. And I vividly remember driving through Watts late in the afternoon, and there was just a car on fire in the middle of the street. And I'm from this small town in Pennsylvania. It's like, how did I get here? What is happening? Other highlights of that job, there was one producer whose car wouldn't start, so I had to pop start her car. And then the other people in the office are like, you shouldn't be doing that. I'm just like, I'll do anything. It's like, I'm not really above anything. There was the sewage got backed up and basically spilled sewage all through our production office.
Oh, God.
So I was not only tasked to shop vac the sewage out, but then before the shop vac could be returned, I then had to manually clean the shop vac. So it's that just sort of tenacity, I think, that made me the man I am today. But again, it was the things where it just wasn't really above anything. Again, I grew up painting houses and working in a factory, and I was cooking Kentucky Fried Chicken. So those are just, you just do the job and you do it well and you do it with a good attitude. And that's sort of how I got started. So I did that. And then they pulled me on to post for that movie. And I was on that for a little while. One of the interesting things on that, it was, again, very naive. I remember Larry Gelbart and his wife were going to a screening of the movie at one of the post houses, and Mr. Gelbart, do you need directions? And he laughed. He's like, I've been doing this for a very long time. I know where I'm going. I'm like, of course you do. So I did post on that for a little while, and then the strangest thing happened. About a year before that, I was temping at E in the mailroom and was invited to go to a career fair, which, again, I think that's the key to this job too, is like, look at every opportunity, take it, run at, if people offer you an opportunity to get to know somebody or to get to know something about a job, it's easy to look for excuses not to. But I got up early, I went to this thing, I submitted my resume to Fox Animation, which was just starting at that point, and which, strangely enough, got a call a year later saying we had a production office assistant They had a production office assistant job available, which again is very odd to sort of go through a human resources route to do that. So
A year later, though.
Yeah,
that is
it was
really,
a year later.
That's
It
crazy.
was crazy. And animation was something I was always interested in growing up. Again, I was artistic. I love drawing. I'm super into comic books. Am still. So got that job, and that was a whole different thing as well, which was feature animation, which is the pace is much different than TV movies or television, and the process is completely different. Again, it was just a new learning experience for me, which I really adored, and I started as a production assistant on there, and then was elevated to coordinator of story and post-production, which was focused on working with the storyboard artists and the editors to present. Not only back then, we used to have to pin storyboards to these giant bulletin boards and transport them over to, it was Chris Meledandri was the executive at the time over at Fox at Fox, and present storyboards and walk through storyboards, but then also getting them into the process of animatics. So it was a real sort of boot camp on story and attention to detail and an understanding of animation and feature film animation, where you have the ability to constantly tweak, look at things, think about things, and evolve what that content is, which again I think is unique to that process. And then eventually, when I worked in TV animation, I'd had that experience, and it was really nice to apply that. So,
what were some of the animated films that were in production while you were at Fox Animation?
That's a great question, because it was the first animation boom. It was the first time that studios beyond Disney, I think, really recognized the value of being in that space and were actively putting resources towards it. So this film was called Titan AE. This was Fox Feature Animation's, I guess, second film after Anastasia. At that point, I remember working with a production assistant who was talking about this thing DreamWorks was doing called Shrek. I think they were having a hard time getting off of the ground. What else was there? That was around Warner Brothers did El Dorado. I'm trying to think of what Universal's foray was. At that time, Disney, it was interesting because it had some film with some similar attributes called Treasure Planet.
Oh, yeah.
And there was every studio was investing big resources in that, and it didn't yield immediate results. So it felt like that business boomed and shrunk as far as when I was thinking about sort of what my next move was going to be. There were a lot of jobs when I started into it, and it shrunk quite a bit by the time that I was wrapping up my time on that film. So,
which is funny because now, like, every studio has an animation department, and it's like they're like massive movies.
Yep. People were sort of sorting through that, and I think that it was. I can remember seeing very early stages of Ice Age. Again, the feature animation years and years and years. But I can remember seeing storyboards of that. So that was about that time.
Gotcha. And so what happened next from Fox
What
Animation?
happened next was we wrapped out our office because the production ended up moving to Arizona. I was like, what am I going to do next? So I started calling old contacts from the live action side. I had planned a trip back to Pennsylvania to visit family. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I was also in transition from a living standpoint where the person I was living with wanted to move out, and I couldn't afford the place by myself. So I needed to find a place to live, a new job. I went back to Pennsylvania, got a little bit of a refresh, came back with the flu. My boss will never know this because it's one of those things where you say it's allergies, but I remember getting a call on Monday saying CBS Productions needs a temp over there. It's on the creative side. It was one of those things like, oh, this is way better than mass mailings. This is the type of thing that I aspire to do.
Yeah.
Most people would have just said, no, I'm sick. I can't go. I threw myself in the shower. I went there. I said it was just allergies because I didn't want them getting mad because I was sick. And it ended up, again, being one of those critical choices because at that point, the assistant to the desk had just gotten promoted, so there was an open position there. So I worked there for a few weeks. The woman who was running the department responded to me. I was eventually offered the position, and that was my first real step towards becoming a creative executive in television. And it was one of those things that, again, I didn't know existed because I was so uneducated on the types of careers that were out here, and outside of director or producer, even when you come out here, you don't know what that is, what that really is, or the different types of things that can mean. And it felt like it was the perfect application of creative and strategy and problem solving that I think that my brain was built for.
Yeah. And like what you're saying is like a big part of why I'm doing this podcast is because like I as well, you show up to this town and you're like, what jobs do people do? And like most of us kind of like just stumble our way into things, or, you just by following doors that open, and like the hopes in doing all these different interviews is that people listen and be like, oh, that's a job. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, that's how I could apply this thing that's in my brain, or like what my personality would be suited for, or whatever. So
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
So I mean, I came out here and I didn't really dabble in writing, but I was unemployed. So like, well, maybe I'll try writing something. So I definitely knew I had that creative thing, but it was also helpful for me to have done that because it increased my respect for people who really are writers and storytellers who have that thing that they need to say, and the ability to translate that from their brain to the page, to the screen. That that wasn't my thing. I love story. I love character. Like I said, I love the problem solving nature of getting from A to B in the most surprising way and still having it make sense to the audience.
Mm-hmm. I also want to point out that so far, your advice to people is be willing to clean sewage out of shop vacs and go to work with the flu. That's the key to success.
Absolutely.
According to Zack Olin.
Yes, you should be your only takeaway.
So you were at, so you said CBS Studios?
CBS, yeah. It was CBS Productions, which is now CBS Television Studios. At that point I came over. They were in a period of transition from a programming standpoint. Their big shows were Touched by an Angel or Walker, Texas Ranger, and they, Les Moonves was there and figuring out sort of how to evolve that network, figure out how to age it down a little bit, and
that was always CBS's thing when I was like younger and like studying the landscape of television. It was like CBS. They get the most viewers, but they're all retired and old people.
The Tiffany Network is what it's called out there. It's true. It was interesting to be there. I was there for probably a total of 4 years to see sort of the strategic and incremental steps, because that's something you can't turn a ship like that overnight. You can't have your audience demographic shift overnight. Certain shows that catch on help that, but that doesn't change a whole schedule. So when I started over there, again, our first thing that we did, it was a co-production with Sony, was The King of Queens. So that was an interesting shift in some of the types of programming and that they were doing. And, they had Raymond at that point, which was working for them. So they were starting to evolve their comedy brand at that point, and then the drama stuff.
And was your boss that you were working for was a comedy executive?
Yes. So she was the head of comedy development at the studio.
And you were doing the answering the phones, scheduling the meetings, copying the scripts.
Yes. Again, no idea what I was doing. Just sort of looked around what other people were doing. Fortunate that the previous assistant was still there, that I could pick his brain. That's another takeaway. Something that it took me a while to learn, because I felt like such an outsider and a bit of a charlatan. Sometimes I probably should have asked more questions. So I would say don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't act like you have to know everything. Don't ask the same question all of the time. Don't ask a variation of the same question all the time. But most people are there to make sure that you succeed and want to give you the skill set to do that. So it was kind of stumbling through it. I think I faked it pretty well, but it was scheduling, booking travel, phone calls, filing. Back then, again, people don't have to deal with this today. Copying scripts, I felt like was 75% of how I spent my day, because they used to have to color code all the different scripts. So each revision came in, had a different color. So you'd have to go to the copier, get salmon paper, which I don't think they make anymore, wait for the copier to warm up, have it jam 5 times, get the script done, get it to my boss. A new revision would come out 10 minutes after that. So and messengers, they don't have messengers anymore. So the digital has eliminated the tedious portion of that job for sure.
Yeah. I started my first job out of college was as an agent's assistant at UTA, and it was all the same thing. And it sounds tedious, and it doesn't sound like the greatest job responsibilities, like answering people's phones and like scheduling their lunches and dinners and everything. But it's a great way to expose yourself to what's going on in a company and be just like because I don't know about you, but like when I was an assistant, we were not encouraged, demanded to listen in on every call. So you're hearing business go on, you're hearing pitches being made, you're hearing notes being given, you're hearing all these things, and it's just like a great way to like absorb knowledge and kind of like figure out what people do. And I found that very helpful. I don't know about you.
I agree. And it's one of those things where I'm glad you brought up the agency thing, because I was going to talk about that a little bit later. I was not really that familiar with that route. And it's so the norm now as far as translating from I don't know what I want to do to start figuring out what you want to do. To your point, you start getting exposed to a bunch of stuff. I feel like there's a certain percentage of agent assistants that become agents, and there's a lot of them that just use that opportunity to figure out what they want to do and pursue that. And becoming a development or creative assistant, sometimes people require agency experience. And again, that was something I wasn't that familiar with at the time, and I probably would have pursued that route. That being said, I might have gone there, and I might have ended up an agent. Who knows? Like I said, it's a great place to discover what's out there and start finding out what that path is that's best for you.
Yeah, I tell people it's like being an agent's assistant. It's almost like going to graduate school in the entertainment industry, because you're just like exposed to everything. You're learning so much. You're also getting like the shit kicked out of you and like yelled at all the time.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm kind of a glutton for punishment, so I kind of like that part of it. So did you end up getting promoted at CBS?
I didn't end up getting promoted at CBS. I worked on the creative desk for about 2 years, and this was around the time in the early 2000s, which we were very close to, at least what my exposure to Hollywood was, the first writer's strike, and I was looking at what that meant to me and saw an opportunity to transition and work in production for new experiences. And this was at the time where CBS was starting to get into reality programming. So I went and worked for the head of production and got exposed to Survivor and Big Brother and just
still at CBS.
Still at CBS Productions,
Gotcha.
Yes. And I did that for a little bit, and I thought that was really interesting. And then, this was an interesting sort of turning point for me, which I had at that point been an assistant for a number of years, was looking at what my options were. I was hoping for growth there, and that at that point they really weren't expanding the department. And I think anybody who's pursuing these types of jobs or finding themselves in a place of, to your point, it is graduate school, and you have to educate yourself, you have to work hard, you have to prepare yourself for opportunities. And then the other 50% of it is there actually that opportunity for you to slot into? And is there that person who's going to give you that opportunity and believe in you and support you in that way. And that job wasn't readily available. And I asked myself, I said, is this the thing for me? I enjoy it. I feel like I've done this portion of the job well for so long, and I'm not yet sort of where I want to be. And then I got a call from a woman who was running the comedy development department at Fox Network. She said, I just lost my assistant. I need somebody immediately. I had built a relationship up with her through our interactions when I was at CBS Productions. And I said, I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if I want to sign up for an assistant job again. I feel like I've done that. And she was very persuasive in a way of like, come work for me for a year. We'll figure something out. I really enjoyed her. I thought she had impeccable creative taste and a great reputation. So I packed up. I went over there. Within the first year, she resigned.
Who was it?
It was Tracy Katsky,
okay,
who's now a producer and just, again, continues to be a wonderful person and friend. And I found myself over there, again, in a little bit of what now situation. And at that point, again, I think through hard work and attitude, had gotten recognition from some other executives there. And it was a similar situation where Craig Erwick had been promoted to be the EVP over there. And it's similar. He's like, I need somebody who can do this and help me transition. We'll figure it out. So I'll try to expedite this. Worked for Craig for a little bit. Jeremy Gold had taken over comedy at the network and hired me to be his coordinator. So that was my first real executive position. It was the first time that I wasn't answering anybody's phones or, doing my own scheduling. And it was just wildly liberating. And I'd worked so hard to get that job that I was just thrilled, and I was prepared and ready for the position in a way that probably in hindsight, I'd seen some other people get those jobs earlier who are not even in the business anymore. Uh-huh. So it just goes back to you have to be patient and make sure that you're really ready for that job, because if you're not, it might not sort of give you the marathon career that you're hoping for.
That is, I tell people that all the time because, everybody is in such a hurry to move up, to get promoted. It can happen too fast. Like, there's definitely something to be said for taking the turtle route, not the hare route. And because if you want this to be your career and you want to do this for 30 years, 40 years, it's like, who cares if you get promoted in, 2010 or 2011? That doesn't really matter. Yep. Like, if, the end goal should be the goal, not just that next promotion, because you can get into a position where you're just not ready and you fail.
Yep.
So.
Yep. It's after you have that failure, it's very hard to recover from that. Mm-hmm. I also tell people that do these jobs because you really love the job, not the title.
Yes.
Do this because you can't see yourself doing anything else, because it's very hard. They're not traditional steps at like working at a paper company where you start here and there's every 2 years you're getting a promotion. That's not here.
Right.
So you have to find the things that you enjoy from the job, and that should be a reward versus the promotion or the pay or whatever that is, because you don't have so much control over that in these jobs.
Totally. And what were you doing as a coordinator there and it was Fox Network?
Fox Network. Yeah, it was a really just an amazing opportunity because I was involved in a lot of things creatively, but the day-to-day was a lot of the coordination of information. So it was tracking competitive projects. So who are the writers out there? Where are they going? What are their ideas? And we use that information to make sure that we were getting to an opportunity to hear the projects that we wanted, or who are setting things up elsewhere that we weren't familiar with, and how should we be tracking them for the future. It was special projects. So I spearheaded this thing called Pitcherapalooza. No, it was Pitcherama. It was Fox's Pitcherama. So they did it was a open submission animated pitch fest to try and find the next Seth or Matt to create animated content for us. So I did everything from reading, working with legal to figure out how to accept submissions, reading submissions, inviting people to California, and then it was a pitch in front of a panel, and then we developed things out of there. I did.
Did that yield any successes?
It didn't. It was a little bit of a learning process.
Mm-hmm.
I think the takeaway from that was we sort of had either people who were writers who didn't understand animation, or the people that we got most excited about were animators who didn't necessarily know the writing. And in hindsight, we should have merged some of those people and made partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to do real development, is a long way to answer your question, which was fantastic. And I was fortunate enough to actually get a pilot made as a coordinator, which that's the other thing I tell anybody that I work with is, in the development side, there's not great ideas aren't turned away. If you're passionate about something, if you can convince other people and get them on board with that passion, they will happily work with you and take co-ownership and helping to execute that. So I'd seen this small play from a writer who was not really in the television writing world yet, and we took that from there and did a staged performance of it, and Fox Network recognized it, and we ended up shooting a pilot for it. And it's a long way of saying what my earlier point was, like, go out there. You don't need a business card that says Vice President of Creative, my assistant. If they bring me a great idea, if they see a piece of IP or a writer or something, do the job. You don't need the title to do the job. I have to get the people above me excited about my ideas. Like, get me excited about your idea the way I have to do it. Let's go out there, and then we can figure out how to do something like that together.
That's cool. And that's a great way for, someone that is an assistant to kind of show their taste or their ambition that's more than just answering phones and copying scripts or whatever.
And the way I always phrase it for my assistants is, prove to me that you can do the job description, which is the scheduling and the phones and all of that stuff. And once you can do that well, then let's start doing the other stuff. Like, make sure you're reading everything that crosses my desk. Don't read something and not talk to me about it, because then what's the point of that? Like, let's engage in a conversation. If you go see a stand-up, if you go see a movie, like, tell me about that. Let's talk about that, because, like I said, there's so much information to absorb out there. Like, having somebody come to me that they're with something that they're excited about is great for both of us.
Yeah, when I was at the talent agency, at that time, I was very big into the alt comedy, the alt stand-up comedy world. A lot of which of those comics are now not alt; they are very mainstream now. But I was going to this place called M-Bar. On Vine, and it was Scott Aukerman ran this night called Comedy Death Ray, and it was like Sarah Silverman and Patton Oswalt and Louis C.K. And at that time, those were like fringe comics,
absolutely,
and I was going every single Tuesday, and I was getting to know a lot of them and just casually, and I remember when I was at the agency, the TV talent agents, I worked in the TV talent department, they knew I was into that world, and so they started calling me into meetings and like, hey, what do you think about this person, or who do you like from this scene? Because they were considering signing some of these people, and the person I remember them asking me about was BJ Novak. Right. They're like, BJ Novak? I was like, I was just like at a party with him on Saturday, because I know all these guys. Like, do you like him? I'm like, yeah, he's fucking funny, like he's kind of a weirdo, but like he's like, he's really funny, and so I think they ended up signing him. But yeah, so that's just I didn't become an agent, but like I was adding value to that department even as an assistant, just by knowing that world and being able to like share opinions about that world. So
that's so key, and that's one of the things I always talk to whoever is my assistant is, like I said, do the job, figure out how to engage with myself, and then also figure out how to make extraordinary contributions to the department. Like, that's how you will get recognized. That's how you will become an asset. That's how you will become somebody that we need, that you individually can provide something that nobody else is providing in the department already. And it's an asset. And it's much easier when you are going to the person above you to try and get somebody promoted to talk about those things versus they do the job very well. Lots of people can do the job very well. But if they say, oh, this person knows stand-ups inside and out. I had one of my assistants who we talked about that, and that was something she was very passionate about, and she was going out in the clubs and said, you should start letting people know that that's what you do, that you're passionate about. Like, you have this library in your head of all of these stand-ups that it gets harder and harder when you're doing my job to get out to clubs 5 nights a week, and you're doing that. And it became a real calling card for her. And she's now a director of creative at HBO. And it's great to see how she was amazing at sort of the job, but then had this thing on top of it that people recognize value in.
Yeah, it's also a shift in mindset that a lot of people have, I think, unfortunately, where it's like, I've been here for a year. Why am I not promoted yet?
Yep.
Like, I've been doing this same job for 3 years. Why am I not getting promoted yet?
Yep.
It's like there's more to just doing the job description.
Yeah,
right?
I think that it goes back to that will be personally rewarding too, because that's the fun part of the job. That's why I always say, like, learn the administrative stuff and then let's do the fun stuff.
Yeah. So how did you end up at ABC? So we're still at
So I was at Fox. I was coordinator. Then I went to be a manager of Current, and I worked on half hour, 1 hour, and unscripted. Simpsons, Bernie Mac, House, 70s Show, America's Most Wanted. How cool is that? Cops. How cool is that? I left there and I went to work in Current at ABC Network, and worked at ABC Network for a period of about 6 years, primarily doing comedy, doing some drama, got to do some animation. And then I went to ABC Studios about 7 years ago, and it was an interesting opportunity in that ABC Studios at that time was getting some traction on the 1 hour side with Lost and Desperate Housewives and Grey's Anatomy, and was on the comedy side figuring out how to transition their comedy brand to line up a little bit more with the drama brand. So it was coming out of a primarily multicam focused slate and figuring out how to be in the single camera half hour space. And my current boss, Amy Hartwick, invited me to come over there. She and I had worked together at ABC Network, and she said, we're kind of like a startup. We're going to be scrappy. We have a lot of support behind us, but we're going to start figuring out how do we want the studio to function? How do we want it to look like? At that point, we had executives in the department from different studios. So we did sort of in different networks and did sort of pros and cons of how everybody did their business and just created our own template. And that was really rewarding, and figuring out sort of what's the writer roster we want to put together. What is the type of show that makes us unique? How do we work with our sister network at ABC? And then also, how do we work with other networks? And how do we basically build studio comedy from the ground up?
I was a quick side note. So I worked at ABC Studios. Did I tell you that?
Yeah, I feel like we talked about
2000 9 or something like that. 2008 maybe. Right? I can't remember. I do that maybe even earlier than that. But it was Jody Platt was running.
Yep.
Comedy.
Yep. And
I had two bosses, Patrick McGuire on the comedy side and Brian Harvey on the drama side.
Patrick now runs drama development at the studio.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Oh, good for him.
Yep.
And I think Brian is at Netflix.
Yes.
Maybe. So yeah, I wonder if we crossed paths ever. Were you at the network?
I was at the
that
network
time?
in 2006.
Okay, so that's
we
probably
must
where
have.
you were. Maybe we saw each other in the commissary or something.
Possibly. Holiday party, maybe.
Okay, so I'm actually excited to talk about this because I think this is something that a lot of people don't know, people that haven't worked inside the studio system or networks and stuff. So you work at ABC Studios.
Yes. What's the difference?
What's the difference between ABC Studios and ABC, the network where I turn the TV on and it has the little ABC logo in the corner?
That's a good question because there are obviously some similarities from the creative side as far as we both work with writers to help develop their ideas into television shows. But, beyond that, the basic difference is ABC Network is a distribution platform. ABC Studios is the company that actually creates the content, and we license the content to networks. So let's just talk about ABC Studios and ABC Network for the sake of this. So we create, produce, finance content that then ABC Network pays for the right to air. So typically that's a 4 time run window that they get. So let's talk about Blackish. We deficit that show. We produce the show. ABC Network airs the show. They can air each episode. I think this is still the standard, up to 4 times. Beyond that, sort of we retain ownership of that show. And then we do distribution beyond that. So we sell it internationally. We handle the SVOD. Back when there was a DVD business, that's sort of how the studio would recoup any deficit, because it typically costs more to produce a show, especially early on its run, than the license fee. So you have to find other ways to compensate.
And even though both divisions, ABC and ABC Network, are owned by Disney,
Yep.
and you guys work on the same campus,
Yep.
essentially.
Yep.
Just got to cross the little bridge over Riverside.
We moved.
We're
We're in the same building.
Oh,
now.
you're in the actual ABC building
Yeah.
now? So now you work in the same building.
We're in the same building.
But it's run like 2 different
Yep.
companies with 2 different budgets, and ABC Network is actually paying money to ABC Studios. Just even though they're owned by the same parent company,
Yep.
they operate separately.
Yep.
Is that right?
They operate separately. That's 100% correct. There's sometimes there is a perception that we operate together. It boils down to we have a great relationship with them. We enjoy working with them. Ultimately, in this day and age, it's beneficial to have a hit studio show on your network for many reasons I won't bore you with. But ABC also has content on their air from outside studios, and we have shows on other networks. Criminal Minds is a show that's a very, very long-running, successful show for us that's on CBS. We, under Patrick Moran, who is the president, started up a division called ABC Signature that does everything that's not network. So we have the show called Smilf on Showtime. So it's a nice relationship, and we get to do a lot of stuff together, but it's not, we date other people as well.
And are you contractually obligated to pitch your shows to ABC Networks
No.
first?
Nope. There's no first look or anything.
Okay.
It's a lot of times creators who want to work at ABC, it makes sense for them to come to us first, because we do have the sort of deepest relationship with them, because we do so much business with them. So by nature, a lot of times things come to us that rightfully should and will end up there because of, like I said, the creators' desire to be there.
Mm-hmm.
But there's shows and things in development that we pitched everywhere that for one reason or another, even if ABC was interested in it, could end up elsewhere.
What are some of the shows that you've developed since you've been there?
Probably the one I'll talk about the most is a show called The Kids Are All Right, which is a new show that premiered this year in the fall, because I think that that's a pretty good case study on sort of what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And this comes from a very talented creator named Tim Doyle, who's been working in Hollywood for some time very successfully, everything from the original iteration of Roseanne to running The Ellen Show to running Last Man Standing. He's developed and done pilots, and just a all-around very talented guy that I had been hoping to be in business with for some time. And we at the studio make things called overall deals. So there are writer, directors, producers that we pay to be exclusive to us, and he's a writer who's under one of those deals for us. And I guess this was his second or third year in his deal, and we were sitting down at lunch, and this was sometime in the summer, and trying to figure out what our year was going to look like. And having developed a few things with him, you wonder sort of how many stories does a writer have to tell? How many stories does a writer want to tell? And we've had so much success on telling personal stories. Again, Blackish being sort of that calling card of sort of pulled from your life, fictionalized, but you are uniquely positioned to tell that story because you've lived a part of it. And Tim had always just told me these stories about his childhood that just were so specific and made me laugh. It was the one that just always stuck with me, which was he grew up in Glendale and one of 8 boys to very conservative Irish Catholic parents. And with that many kids, you had to sort of figure it out. And the thing that he told me maybe once, and it just stuck with me, was, my mom had to be crafty. Like, if we didn't have medicine, she would go through her box of pills, and if there was something that the dog took that matched up some of our ailments, we would end up with dog medicine. I said, that is just like, I've never heard that before. I've never heard that specific story. I've never heard sort of that philosophy. It paints such a vivid picture of not only what your childhood was, but also who your mom was, in 2 sentences. And I said, Tim, like, why have you never done this? And like you've spent 20 years basically doling out these stories to other people's shows as jokes. And he was like, I just never thought it was that interesting, which was like a really awakening moment for me of not only him, but just people's sort of confidence in their own story and telling the story that they should be versus the story that they think that they should be doing. And for storytelling, again, for me, it's sort of that honesty that is key versus the fabricated or engineered idea. And it's always just a much better starting point, because if you're engineering, like, oh, I'm doing a show about 5 people who go to Mars, then you have to sort of figure out and overlay what that is, again, how you're uniquely positioned to tell that story if you've never gone to Mars.
Right.
And that's what's going to make it stand out and resonate with people. And so, yeah, we came out of that lunch, and I said, Tim, I feel like the time is now. Like, your stories make me laugh. It feels like it not only resonates with me, but it feels like there's such a universal nature to this family and the things that we do to get by and still provide for each other and still have a loving home and some level of wish fulfillment, even in hard times. And he went out and he said, let me think about it. And he came back. He's like, I think I have a handle on this. He pitched it to, I guess he came in and pitched it to me and my boss, Amy, and we immediately just like, yes, Tim, this is the thing that you should be doing. And he still wasn't sure. He's like, are you sure? Like, you like this? And it's funny. I would encourage everybody to go watch the pilot in particular, because it is his story, and it will inform why he possibly never told this story before, because the whole pilot story is basically like the mother to the Timmy character in the show is like, you're not interesting. Who would ever want to hear from you? So he went out and he wrote this amazing script, and we pitched it. This was a time that we actually just pitched it to ABC because I knew it was something that would work for them, and they basically, when we pitched it to them, made a huge commitment. and we say take it off the table. So they had shown such enthusiasm that regardless if we pitched it elsewhere, it probably would have ended up there. So, we try not to waste anybody else's time by pitching them something that they're likely not to get. So
they're doing well with these like quirky single family,
exactly,
single camera family comedies.
Exactly. So it felt like it fit there for sure. He wrote this amazing script. It was the pilot script that so many directors wanted to do. We got very fortunate. Randall Einhorn came and directed the pilot. It attracted a cast, which sometimes doing these family shows, finding actors who want to play the mom and a dad and can bring specificity to that role. Michael Cudlitz and Mary McCormick came on board. So it was a kind of an example of there's so many parts of the process in doing a pilot or a show where things can go right or wrong. This was a one that just, because of the strength of the script, things kept going right.
Mm-hmm.
And we shot the pilot. It was very well received. It went on the fall schedule, and it's on the air. And it's a show that I'm very proud of. And I think more important than me being proud of, Tim's very proud of it, because my job is to help the creator translate the ideas from their brain onto the screen in a way that it will resonate with the most number of people. I need to protect the original vision. I need to make sure their compass doesn't get lost in the process of development. I need to, at the end of the day, make sure that even if it doesn't yield the result that they want, they feel like the piece of art that they've created is the best version of that it's better than when they started, that they enjoyed the process. If I haven't done that, then I've failed. Even if the show becomes a success, if the creator doesn't feel like it's a representation of the story they wanted to tell, again, it's a failure on my part.
I like this story because it is like a great example of just, what I think you do and just like in success. So it's like, a creative executive at a studio, you're meeting with writers, you're taking pitches, you're getting to know comics or, seeing plays. You're just kind of like interacting with the creative community, right?
Yep.
And then you had this relationship with Tim and you're like encouraged him to write an idea. So I'm sure you're doing this like every day with dozens of writers, just like being like, oh, you should work on this, or giving out script deals to this person or whatever. But then as the writing as the script's being written, he's also using you as like a soundboard probably. He's giving you his drafts. You're giving notes on the draft.
Yep.
Right. And then so you're shepherding this project from like inception to on television.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy like the notes process? Do you like weighing in on the script or even like the pilot and the cuts and that kind of stuff?
I do. It's when you're starting this job, it is the most daunting part of the job. And I would say if you're not a little bit intimidated on giving notes when you are just starting off as a creative executive, you should probably pause, because if you go into it with a level of hubris and a complete sort of confidence in sort of what you're doing, you might be missing the point, because it's not about giving notes. It's about having a conversation. It's about sort of figuring out. It's very easy to say I like something, I don't like something. To sit back and figure out how to sort of help the writer address that is a skill set that the good part about this job is you never stop learning. There's always new challenges. There's always new conversations. There's always new people that you work with that are approaching material differently. And if you don't stop learning in my job, then you can sort of do things by rote, and then things will become homogenous. So again, to answer your question, I do enjoy it. I do enjoy the conversation of it. It's super scary when you start, because you just got your wings and you're talking to somebody who could have been doing this for 20 years and have had 3 successful shows on the air. And who am I to act like I know better just because I'm in a chair in a building where they have to accept my calls and at least listen to what I have to say.
Mm-hmm.
But you really sort of position yourself and work to build a relationship of partnership versus I'm the studio executive and you're the writer and you have to listen to me. It's a 100% wrong way to approach it. I do actually the opposite approach, and this is something I kind of formulated just from different conversations with people. I have the approach of I work for you. Like,
Interesting.
I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you succeed. That's where I actually get the most reward out of this job. Like, you're not here to help get me promoted. If I help you succeed, maybe that'll happen for me. Great. But this is way more important for you. You're writing something, you're creating art, you're putting yourself out there personally. What you have at stake is way more at stake than what I have. So let me help you get there as a partner, fresh eyes, somebody who is a little bit closer to knowing what the buyer wants, what they are talking about, what issues they might have. Let's collectively figure out how to address those issues. Do we want to address those issues? If you don't want to address those issues because it's getting you away from the vision, let's have that conversation.
Now all writers in Hollywood are going to be clamoring to want to pitch you. They're like, I want a studio executive that works for me. So it goes through the script process. Then you take it out personally. You and the writer go out and meet with the networks.
Yep.
You let the writer do the pitching, and you kind of sit there and just chime in.
This job's a little bit more entrepreneurial even than when I started in the studio. In that the first year I started, it felt like pitches came through the door. So you sort of sit back and, like sort of classic thing, like, what do you got for me? Now I spend probably 80 to 90% of my development time figuring out people that I want to work with, that I think I can help be successful, given in sort of the landscape that I work in, trying to get those people to want to work with me, trying to land on the right idea, helping them shape the pitch in a way that it's coming clearly when you sit down in this meeting, sort of what your intention is, and everybody coming out of that with you have to understand what the intent is at that point, because if there's confusion there's going to be confusion downstream. Helping make sure that if we have multiple suitors for the project, I can share whatever information I have and guide it to hopefully the platform that's most likely going to put it on the air and support it and where it can be successful. And then going throughout the process as fresh eyes and another perspective on the material, from page to all the way through pre-production, through production, through post-production, through staffing. How can I help educate you on writers that you might not be familiar with that could be assets to your show? I probably have a bigger Rolodex of who those candidates are than you might as a showrunner. If you feel like you have needs within there, if you have your team in place, that's fantastic, but let me help you with that.
And you're overseeing, the studio is the one that hires the director, so you're taking director meetings. You guys participate in casting of like actors. You have a casting department, but you guys are looking at people's reads. You're going to casting sessions, doing all that. So you're really like, I mean, you're kind of you if you were to like equivalent it to like the film side of things, like you are the producer of the project. I mean, you are the production company. You're the producer. Right.
But then again, it's like there's the term producer, as I talked about earlier. Like, that's not my title. We have producers on the shows who do that. I feel like it's more creative supervision and information hub, because I'm the one who's having most day-to-day conversations with the creator. And to your point, there is production departments and casting departments and legal departments, business affairs departments that we're all working together to execute this show. So a lot of times I'm the one who's facilitating and coordinating some of that information and making sure that everything is working together smoothly to produce this. It's a monumental task. There's a lot of hardworking people that make contributions to actually execute the show.
And then once the pilot's made and it's picked up to series,
Yep.
it's out of your hands at that point?
We do a transition at our company, which seems to be the norm if there's a separate current department, which is a very similar job in that you are interfacing with your creators on creative elements of your show. I can talk about that a little bit more if you want a sort of brief snapshot as far as what that job is, because I've done that job. But I usually transition from development to the current department over the first year of the show for a couple of reasons. Again, I talked about partnership before, so I want to make sure that the creator and the producers have a trusting partnership with their new executive. I think that's how everybody can sort of be most effective versus just handing something to somebody new and them trying to build a relationship from zero once the train is already leaving the station. So it's partially that. It's then I can educate both sides on sort of where we've been, be a resource for that. There's still a lot of development that happens once the show is picked up to air. It's still finding itself, especially a first-year show. It could be across the first year, it could be across the second year, it could be across the third year. So I can be helpful in continuing to refine what the show is. Out of necessity, because of the volume that I do, my development cycle really kicks in the fall. So there's just sort of a natural progression where I need to shift focus back to that. And then the current team who will take over the show and oversee the show for the life of the show. So again, current executive involved in sort of the day-to-day creative of the show. And I have such respect for them because I've done that job. And they are the protector of the show and series. They are the voice of the show at the studio to the network and how the show is being marketed and promoted and publicity and all of that stuff. Because I remember when I was a creative executive speaking with an agent, and he's like, this creator, my client is there, and they're just out there kind of in the vacuum working so hard on their show. And it's so important that they know that you are there and being the voice and the defender of their show and having sort of that global interest for the success of their show. So those are amazing jobs as well.
I mean, very simply, as a development executive, your job is to find projects and get them on TV.
Yep.
And then the current executive, they sort of oversee them once they are on TV.
Yep. For
right?
the life of the show.
Which do you like better, since you've done both?
I like both. I made a choice to come back to development. I think there's pros and cons to both. Current executive, there's a long relationship that you have with the show that is extremely rewarding. You can work on a show for 5 years and see the evolution of that show, and it's like sort of raising a family together. There is a volume that I think is really good. I almost say if you're sort of starting these jobs, I would encourage being a current executive before being a development executive, because you need to know that a show can succeed in season 3 and sort of have that experience of making sure that the architecture is in place for a successful series, not a successful pilot, because a successful pilot will just cost your company a lot of money because you'll do a season of television and not get a second season. Mm-hmm. There's a little bit more autonomy in current, in that you have your 5 shows, you have a department head, but it's sort of you focused as the creative voice and the overseer within that department. And the development side, at least the companies I've worked at, it's in a good way much more team oriented. So it's 3, 4, 5 executives. We'll all have will be shows that we're point on for day to day, but the conversations in a good way happen across the department. Mm-hmm. Because we all have, if the department's put together in a good way, sort of unique perspectives on things. and can ask questions with one another and bounce things off of each other.
Is it ever hard for you to let go of a show that you've developed and like send it down into the current department? Do you ever like feel ownership that you're like, this is my show?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm fortunate where I have partners on the current side that I trust that can do that job and know that job very well. And there's no sort of anxiety that the show's not going to be okay. So it's not that. It's just, also like, again, Tim and I were in the trenches together for a year, and you sort of miss that relationship to some degree. And now I'm just like texting him congratulations, or if I like something.
Right.
So it's different in that regard. And it's a family. You get, the good and the bad about these jobs is the good is you get emotionally invested in the people and the projects. And the bad is you get emotionally invested in the people and the projects. So when you do have to not spend so much time with them, it's hard. Or if it doesn't, yield the success that you'd hope, that's hard as well. So
that was the reason, because I started in development in reality, and it's much, much different. But, we would work on these shows. We put together these decks. We'd find casts, shoot these reels, get to know them, put it together, and take it out, pitch it, and then it's like if something would sell, and be like, all right, Jeremiah, back to your cubicle, we need another one, and like
right.
I would be like, no, I want to like make the show now, which is ultimately why I transitioned into production, because like I'm just the kind of guy that like I need to be in the trenches, like that's where I'm the happiest, like not like overseeing things or whatever. That's actually, because when I was at ABC Studios, I didn't think it was for me, because I was like, I don't know. I always felt like, and I was only an assistant, so I that's my perspective. I never was an actual executive there, but like, I felt that like I long term was going to want to be more hands on and more creatively invested and like just dirtier inside the project than like reading scripts and giving notes and like setting up meeting, kind of, which is like such a skill and a talent, and but I would just like. I want it to be like there. I want it to be just in it. So, and that's something that I like about reality TV, is that I do think it's like it offers that opportunity to a lot more people that were working on it. Like it's just very much like we're just getting dirty every day, just making the show, and so that's that's what I like about reality and production.
Yeah, and on the reality versus scripted, I think the big difference to keep in mind for people who are maybe interested in both, and this became very evident where I have a colleague who works on the unscripted side, and like you would make just an amazing scripted like comedy development executive. Don't like reading. My job, you have to like reading. I have a database of, for the time that I've been keeping track, I've read probably 6,000 scripts.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
To be any sort of development executive, this is a 24/7, 365. You become sort of programmed to look at the world in a way that not everything is a television show, but you're taking in information constantly. I have a curious mind, so I read a ton. I look for ideas everywhere. There's an entrepreneurial part of this job that I talked about that's not the classic where just somebody comes in with a pitch. Like I'm out there chasing down IP. I'm at comedy festivals looking for talent who, like I said earlier, that I think I can help be successful with. So it's becomes a bit of a lifestyle, and if you love it, it's great, but if you don't like reading, it's probably not the job for you, because I come home every night, and again, depending on where you are in the year, you could have 2 hours of reading after you get home, after you get done having your work dinner, if you've got kids, after you put your kids down. It's just the way that is. But again, I enjoy that part of it. Like my curious mind is, people make fun of me because they're always like, oh, as soon as a script comes in, they're like, oh, you already read it. And I most of the time had, because I'm just like, oh, what is in there? What has my writer done now? Or if it's a writer that we're interested in being business with, I'm trying to get to know sort of what they can do. I'll tear it open and I'll dig into it. It's not like the drag of like I have to read this thing. That's not a great starting point for this job.
Mm-hmm. We'll wrap it up because we've been going for a while, and I know you got to get to the mountains. What would be your best advice for people that want to get into the executive side of television? Say there's, they're either moving out here, breaking in, or, the like hundreds and hundreds of assistants that are working right now that want to do what you're doing. Like we talked a lot about it like before, but what, adding value and stuff. But what's some other advice you can give to people?
It's getting your foot in the door in these types of departments is challenging. I understand that. I don't know if it's more or less challenging when I started. So I think you have to create opportunities. To your earlier point, be open to different ways of getting where you want to go, but keep track of what your compass is. Hard work, listen. There's I think you'll sort of learn from my story, there's no sort of clear path to go. I would say if I was doing it now, I would probably explore the agency route now. I would explore smaller production companies. And there's a lot going on in the digital space that you can work at a company and get exposed to a bunch of different types of things and might have a different level of involvement in a education than just sitting on a creative desk for a couple of years. Be open to opportunities and sort of look at what those opportunities provide, and is there something that's going to help get you where you want to go, even if it's not a clear line. Definitely be open to those things.
Can you remember some good advice that someone gave you at some point in your career that stuck with you?
I think it was that. It was really sort of, we're all sort of, there's not a straight line to get to this job. Be open to following some different things, work hard, make sure it applies to what you want to do and not get so far off track. I think as much as you can, work for people that you respect and admire, because that's where you're going to learn the most. Hopefully work for somebody who's going to take some ownership in you and your career, and have some sort of mentorship qualities, because it's all sort of learning as you go, and having somebody there who can help you learn is extremely helpful.
That's awesome. Well, Zach, thank you so much for doing this. It's very eye-opening, educational, entertaining. You're a great dude. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me. Thanks for hearing me ramble.
Thanks, man.
All right, bye.
All right, that was my conversation with Zack Olin. What a smart, interesting guy. And doesn't his job sound like a lot of fun? Thanks again for listening, everybody. If you haven't already, please go on to iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you're listening and subscribe, rate it, leave a review. That is very, very helpful to the show. Also, just tell a friend. Tell someone you think will enjoy this about the show and send them the link. You can find the show on Instagram. It's Working Class Hollywood, or shoot me an email at show@workingclasshollywood.com. Just a reminder, I won't be publishing a podcast next week. I'm taking the week off for New Year's, but I will be back at the beginning of January with all new episodes. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.